I reckon it's the police woman in charge.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
I've got a question. I've got a question for you, which will make you think. Don Bell is unique among footballers, professional football.
Oh, sorry.
He played for Crystal Palace, Newcastle, and Don Bell, Bell. None of us have seen him. I doubt. I don't think any of us are old enough. But he's absolutely unique in professional footballers. And if I tell you when he died, it might help you. He died on the 5th of July, 1916. Why is he unique?
Something to do with the Somme, I suppose.
He died at the Somme, yeah.
Yeah.
He died on the Somme, yes.
Yeah.
Did he
Was
play
it
in the 1915 Cup final and then died on
We
the
ought
Somme?
to remember him, and none of us do.
Is he
Is
the
it
guy
to
who
do
led
with
the
the-
charge with the football?
Is it to do with it
No.
within the VC?
He's the only professional footballer.
VC.
Yes. He's the only professional footballer ever to win the Victoria Cross. I read that in a book this week. Thought might be interested. Can't remember him. None of us can remember him, but we ought to do, really.
What to do, yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus, Mary Joseph and a wee donkey.
It was mentioned when the second time when we went to the National Football Museum, it was mentioned then.
Was it?
Oh,
Yeah.
you see, you've still got a memory pool.
But it's going fast.
right.
Not
Okay.
that fast, Paul.
Yeah. Right. Let's get into it. I've remembered it's John's story this week. John, tell
Yeah,
us.
if only I could remember what we're supposed to be talking about, Keith. Yeah.
Come on.
Anyway, the film I want to talk about is one that sort of grew up with in the 50s, watching the old black and white telly with my mum and dad. We were a sucker for old Warner Brothers films, especially Errol Flynn, Jimmy Cagney, and then Burt Lancaster, one of my all-time heroes. And I remember watching with my mum and dad Man of Bronze with Burt Lancaster about Jim Thorpe. I'll go on to talk about later. I mean, it's a 1951 Warner Brothers film, released in America 1951 as Jim Thorpe All-American, and in this country as Jim Thorpe Man of Bronze. And I just thought it was fantastic. I love Burt Lancaster, and then the story of Jim Thorpe is phenomenal. He did so much that I'll need a serial to get through it, but I won't take a serial to get through it. It was billed as, it was a Native American regarded by many as the greatest athlete of all time. And the film was billed as the triumphant tragedy of Native American Jim Thorpe, who after winning both pentathlon and decathlon in the same Olympics, is stripped of his medals on a technicality. Well, that's true, and that forms the core of the film, but it's by no means the whole of the film. There's so much more to it. Not one of the best films I've seen, but an exciting film and very emotive. And Burt Lancaster is emotional best, but also is athletic best. I mean, I'd bet on Burt Lancaster to take on all the modern superheroes, Schwarzenegger, and not that he's that modern anymore. For all the big blokes nowadays, Burt Lancaster would have sorted them. I hope most of you would agree with me on that.
Yeah, indeed.
Yes, thank you for that. It was directed by Michael Curtiz, who, as you will remember, directed films like Captain Blood, Adventures of Robin Hood, Casablanca, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy. Yeah, that one. Yeah,
Charge of the Light Brigaders.
and famous for Bring on the Empty Horses. In
Indeed.
charge of the Light Brigade, yeah.
Indeed.
Was I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy in Casablanca?
Yeah. Can you remember James Cagney dancing across the sand, doing a sand dance? Yeah. The film, as I said, starred Burt Lancaster. I mean, nobody could have done a better job. He had to learn how to kick a football, play football, how to hit a baseball, and how to throw discus, javelin, and the shot, amongst other skills. He did intense training every day. I mean, he was 37. If you see the film, and you can get it on Amazon Prime, he looks nothing like 37, but neither does he look like the college boy that he's supposed to be. But he was in superb shape, and he was ideal for the part. Also starring was Charles Bickford as Coach Pop Warner, a character so named because he was at 24 the oldest player in his team at the time when he was in his prime. So at 24 he earned the sobriquet Pop. He was known for, Charles Bickford, known for he got 3 Oscar nominations for Song of Bernadette. Always remember that one. The Farmer's Daughter, Keith will remember her. And Johnny Belinda. Yeah. He was also in A Star Is Born and Big Country. You can hum the theme tune to that if you like, as we're going on. Steve Cochran was in it as a friend, a slight antagonist of Burt Lancaster's early on, but a subsequent friend in Man of Bronze. But he was also a major character in White Heat. And thanks to Chris, found that Jim Thorpe actually had a bit part in White Heat. The Native American Indian was in one of the prison scenes as an extra. White Heat.
Got to the top, Ma.
Yeah, made it Ma, top of the world. I mean, a curious choice of an Indian studying to be a lawyer was Dick Wesson. Anybody remember him? He was in Calamity Jane, but can you remember what part he played? Big Teeth. No, he didn't play the horse. He didn't play Doris Day's horse.
Stagecoach.
Yeah.
Bartender.
He
Bartender.
played the part of Frances Fryer, dressed as a woman, in case of mistaken identity. They'd sent her away to Chicago for a female star. And because she was called Frances, they thought it was a woman, but it was Francis, not Frances. So he had to dress as a woman to try and carry it through, but obviously he was seen through. But he was a comedy element both in Calamity Jane and in Man of Bronze. Phyllis Thaxter, although I don't think many of us will remember, played Jim Thorpe's wife. She was known for a part in Springfield Rifle in 1952 with Gary Cooper. But curiously, she had a long television career, but curiously, she played Ma Kent in the original Superman, in the original Superman film in 1978. Can anybody remember who played Pa Kent in the Superman film?
Glenn Ford.
Glenn
Ford. Glenn Ford, the fastest man alive. Yeah, terrific.
The Sheep Man.
The Sheep Man, superb film. Yeah. Her last appearance on screen was on TV in Murder, She Wrote, 1992. Now, the film, going back to Man of Bronze, it takes enormous liberties with facts. I mean, but the full story, as I said, would take about a 13-week series on telly or 13 films because he did so much. It's typical of Warner Brothers films. I grew up thinking that everything I saw on a Warner Brothers film, like with Little Big Horn and stuff like that, and Captain Blood and Charge, I believed it all was true. It's been an intense disappointment to me as I've grown up to find that it wasn't. But in many respects, it was better than the truth. It was more real. I mean, it was emotional. It was happy. It was some fantastic feats, whatever film you saw, especially Bigfoot. They've got fantastic feet.
Robin Hood was true, though, wasn't it, John?
Robin Hood was exactly true.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah. Errol Flynn, Robin Hood, can only be approached by Richard Green's Robin Hood. I'll put them at the top of my list.
Okay.
John,
Yeah,
you still got those fairies at the bottom of your garden?
I have. And I was there when Arthur Conan Doyle photographed them. It's amazing. Now, in real reality, Jim Thorpe had 3 wives, and for the purpose of the film, narrowed down to 1. He had 8 kids who narrowed down to 1 in the film. IMDb gives it 7 out of 10, which is the 3 that it likes, probably down to its accuracy. I mean, the significant truth of his first son dying tragically through illness is like a central fulcrum of the film. And he never recovered from that. And interestingly, Burt Lancaster's son was seriously ill with infantile paralysis. Jim Thorpe's son had infantile paralysis. Burt Lancaster's son almost died of polio, age 10. So he had something in common with the character he was playing, and he certainly played it well. There's reviews of the film, a couple of reviews. True story of Native American Jim Thorpe, true in inverted commas, I think, who rose from an Oklahoma reservation to become a collegiate, Olympic and professional star. After his medals are stripped on a technicality and his dream of coaching is shattered, Thorpe's life begins to unravel. His marriage to his college sweetheart ends and he's a forgotten figure, except by Glenn Pop Warner, his coach at Carlisle College. Not strictly true, but it gives you the flavour. Sure, this is revisionist history here, but it did show both the good and bad sides of Thorpe, one of America's all-time greatest athletes who excelled almost a century ago. Some still think he is the best athlete ever in the history of the United States. Yeah, terrific. The film is worth watching for the man it portrays, who I'm going to show you as a superb athlete in more than one sport. If you don't mind, and again, thanks to Chris, who pointed me in the right direction, I'll give you a couple of quotes from Burt Lancaster's biography and about the person he played. James Francis Thorpe was arguably the best all-round athlete America ever produced. Born in a one-room cabin in Prague, Oklahoma in 1888, Bright Path, as he was known by his tribe, the Sac and Fox tribe, became an All-American football player at the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania and a two-time Olympic gold medalist for the pentathlon and the decathlon. So Lancaster was perfect for the role. Walter Seltzer, who recalled taking him on a round of sporting activities for a Forties magazine spread, asserted there wasn't anything physical that Burt Lancaster couldn't do. Moreover, Burt had the hard edge the role required. Thorpe's alcoholism, his sullen disposition, his failed marriage, and his near indigence in middle age were not the stuff of a typical Hollywood biography. But to their credit, screenwriters Douglas Morrow and Everett Freeman did little to soften the character's nature, nor did they completely avoid his decline during his post-athletic years. I mean, a tremendous performance.
Yeah.
I don't think we need any more quotes from that. So I would heartily recommend the film, not if you want accuracy, but I mean in the Hollywood days, when did you get accuracy? But you did get action, you did get emotion, and they were real heroes portrayed. Maybe they weren't heroic in the way they were portrayed, but certainly in Jim Thorpe's case, but not Colonel Custer's case, he was a true hero in sport. This is a picture from the biography of Jim Thorpe.
Who wrote that, John?
Pardon? Who wrote that? It was Robert W. Wheeler, who was the man who worked so hard to try and get his medals back. He was totally supportive of Thorpe and set up a group who worked together to try and get his medals back. This is a picture of Burt Lancaster as a poster for the film.
Remember it.
What was the technicality, John, that cost him his medals?
I'll come to that in a bit, Brian. It's very interesting and very dodgy, really. That's Burt Lancaster as a footballer. Sorry that my printer went dodgy, but that's him in the middle as a footballer, American footballer in the film. This here is Jim Thorpe at the 1912 Olympics.
Wow.
Big bloke, not so massively tall or massively built, but just perfectly proportioned in every muscle and sinew and fibre. And that's him in his American football days. So Jim Thorpe, born, as I said, in Prague, near Prague, Oklahoma, in 1888. His name was Watho Hook, as you'll know, Keith, means bright path. He was an American athlete and Olympic gold medalist, a member of the Sac-Fox Nation, Thorpe became the first Native American to win a gold medal for the United States. Considered one of the most versatile athletes of modern sports, he won 2 Olympic gold medals in the 1912 Summer Olympics, one in classic pentathlon and the other in the decathlon, and played American football, collegiate and professional, professional baseball, and professional basketball. Yeah, he lost his Olympic titles after it was found he had been paid for playing 2 seasons of semi-professional baseball before competing in the Olympics, thus violating the amateurism rules that were then in place. I'll get round to that in a bit, the story around that. He went to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, in the Cumberland Valley, where I'm sure Cumberland Gap comes from. We know a song about that, don't we?
Yeah.
Anybody want to sing it?
Bonnie Donegan.
Bonnie Donegan. That's it. Yeah, I'll get around to his Olympic. He had an amazing football career at college level, and he took the Indian team to be the best in the country. They beat Harvard, they beat Yale, they beat the Army, and in a game against the Army, Jim Thorpe came up against Dwight D. Eisenhower and battered him a bit, and then Eisenhower later gave a speech where he credited Thorpe as being the best American footballer of all time, or the first half of the 20th century. And from 1920 to 21, Thorpe was nominally the first president of the American Professional Football Association, which became the NFL in 1922. He played professional sports until age 41, and the end of his sports career coincided with the start of the Great Depression. He struggled to earn a living after that, working several odd jobs, and he suffered from alcoholism and lived his last years in failing health and poverty. He was married 3 times and had 8 children, as I've said, before suffering from heart failure and dying in 1953. I mean, he's received various accolades for his athletic accomplishments. The Associated Press named him the greatest athlete from the first 50 years of the 20th century. And the Pro Football Hall of Fame inducted him as part of its inaugural class in 1963. And the town of Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, was named in his honor and has a monument site that contains his remains, which were the subject of legal action because his family wanted to take it back to his place of birth. Thorpe appeared in several films, and it says he was portrayed by Burt Lancaster in the film I've described. I mean, he actually appeared as an extra or with some small speaking parts in 71 different films in the 20s and 30s. I'll get around. You still on a second? His college career. Thorpe began his athletic career at Carlisle in 1907 when he walked past the track and beat all the school's high jumpers with an impromptu 5'9" jump, still in street clothes. His earliest recorded track and field results come from 1907. He also competed in football, baseball, lacrosse, and even ballroom dancing, winning the 1912 Intercollegiate Ballroom Dancing Championship. So it obviously he would have won Strictly. Yeah. His Olympic career. I mean, for the 1912 Summer Olympics in Stockholm, Sweden, 2 multi-event disciplines were included, the pentathlon and the decathlon. A pentathlon, based on the ancient Greek event, had been introduced at the 1906 Intercalated Games. I think Paul the Biscuit told us about them a few months ago. Remember, I think you mentioned that as part of your Olympic. I don't think it was a honeymoon you went on in that year, though, 1906. But can you remember why they were in Intercalated Games in 06, Paul?
No.
No, neither can I. But there was a 1904 Games at St. Louis, and then a 1906 Intercalated Games. They thought they'd sling one in the middle, in between. The 1912 version consisted of the pentathlon, the long jump, javelin, 200-meter dash, discus throw, and the 1500-meter run. The decathlon was a relatively new event in modern athletics, although a similar competition known as the All-Around Championship had been part of American track meets since the 1880s, and a version had been featured on the program of the 1904 St. Louis Olympics. The events of the new decathlon differed slightly from the American version. According to and in many events, going back to college days, Jim Thorpe had formed his college's entire track team and field team. Occasionally, another Indian would run in one of the events or take part in one of the other events, but often Jim Thorpe was the Carlisle School track team and won the meet as well. On his own. According to his obituary, in the New York Times, he could run the 100-yard dash in 10 seconds flat, the 220 in 21.8 seconds, the 440 in 51.8 seconds, and the 880 in 1 minute 57. The mile in 4 minutes 35, 120 yards high hurdles in 15 seconds, and the 220-yard low hurdles in 24 seconds. He could long jump 23 feet 6, high jump 6 foot 5, pole vault 11 feet, put the shot 47 feet 9, and throw the javelin 163 feet and the discus 136 feet. Now, you'll agree by modern standards that isn't much, but we can only judge by the standards of the day when these were considerable times, fast and long. The distances he threw and jumped were long.
And
He entered the US Olympic trials for both the pentathlon and the decathlon. He easily earned a place on the pentathlon team, winning 3 events. The decathlon trial was subsequently cancelled and Thorpe was chosen to represent the US in the event. I mean, the pentathlon and decathlon teams also included future International Olympic Committee President Avery Brundage, who plays a major part in what subsequently happened.
John,
Yeah.
you attempted to put those times and distances into context, but there's no living athlete that could measure up to the breadth of that capability.
That's right. That's right. There were people who could beat him in individual events, but there wasn't anybody who could do the breadth of the range of skills he'd got, the jumps, the running. He also played, as I will say, American football, baseball, lacrosse.
At school,
basketball.
anybody at school who got that sort of capacity would win what they call the Victor Ladorum.
That's right.
He must be the Victor Ladorum of his day, I would have thought.
Definitely. Says his schedule along with in the Olympics was busy. Along with the two, the pentathlon, decathlon, he competed in the individual long jump and high jump. He won 4 of the 5 events and placed 3rd in the 5th, the javelin in the pentathlon. And he had not competed in before 1912. Although the pentathlon was primarily decided on place points, points were also earned for the marks achieved in the individual events, and he won the gold medal. The same day, he qualified for the high jump final, in which he finished 4th, and on July the 12th, he placed 7th in the long jump, the individual long jump final. His final event at the Olympics was the decathlon, his first and only decathlon. Strong competition from local favourite Hugo Weislander. I think they'd chosen the decathlon as their event, Sweden, because Weislander was expected to win it. Thorpe, however, defeated him by 688 points. He placed in the top 4 in all 10 events, and his Olympic record of 8,413 points would stand for nearly 2 decades. Even more remarkably, because someone had stolen his shoes just before he was due to compete, he found a mismatched pair of replacements, including one from a trash can, and won the gold medal wearing them. This is like Alf Tupper, tough of the track, this, isn't it? He probably slept in a haystack the night before and had a fish and chip supper. Yeah.
Shades of Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. Wilson. Overall, Thorpe won 8 of the 15 individual events comprising the pentathlon and the decathlon. As was the custom of the day, the medals were presented to the athletes during the closing ceremonies of the games. Along with the 2 gold medals, Thorpe also received 2 challenge prizes, which were donated by King Gustav V of Sweden for the decathlon and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia for the pentathlon. Several sources recount that when awarding Thorpe his prize, King Gustav said, "You, sir, are the greatest athlete in the world," to which Thorpe replied, "Thanks, King," although apparently that's not true.
I wish.
Yeah. Where are we? Thorpe's successors had not gone unnoticed at home, and on his return, he was the star attraction in the ticker tape parade on Broadway. He remembered later, "I heard people yelling my name, and I couldn't realise how one fellow could have so many friends." Then, apart from his track and field appearances, he also played in one of 2 exhibition baseball games at the 1912 Olympics, which featured 2 teams composed mostly of US track and field athletes. In 1912, where are we? Yeah. In 1912, strict rules regarding amateurism were in effect for athletes participating in the Olympics. Athletes who received money prizes for competitions were sports teachers or had competed previously against professionals, were not considered amateurs and were barred from competition. In late January 1913, the Worcester Telegram published a story announcing that Thorpe had played professional baseball, and other US newspapers followed up the story. Thorpe had indeed played professional baseball in the Eastern Carolina League for Rocky Mount, North Carolina in 1909 and 1910, receiving meager pay, reportedly as little as $2 per game. College players, in fact, regularly spent summers playing professionally, but most used aliases, unlike Thorpe. I mean, from the Indian school and at holiday times, like many of us would have a job during the holidays, the Indians were expected to go probably work on a farm. But it was known that he was good at sport, so the local baseball team asked him to play for them, more or less bed and board. And nobody told him that this would break the amateur code. And certainly his coach, Pop Warner, who must have known, didn't tell him that this broke the amateur code, but he was allowed to go on to the Olympic, when there's a feeling that many people supported him because they thought he would win and were aware of his couple of summers as a professional. Yeah. Although the public did not seem to care much about Thorpe's past, the Amateur Athletic Union, and especially its secretary, James Edward Sullivan, took the case very seriously. Thorpe wrote a letter to Sullivan in which he admitted playing professional baseball. The letter was, "I hope I will be partly excused by the fact that I was simply an Indian schoolboy, did not know about such things. In fact, I did not know that I was doing wrong, because I was doing what I knew several other college men had done, except that they did not use their own names." His letter didn't help. The AAU decided to withdraw Thorpe's amateur status retroactively. Later that year, the International Olympic Committee unanimously decided to strip Thorpe of his Olympic titles, medals and awards and declare him a professional. Although Thorpe had played for money, the AAU and IOC did not follow the rules for disqualification. The rule book for the 1912 Olympics stated that protests had to be made within 30 days from the closing ceremonies of the Games. The first newspaper reports did not appear until January 1913, about 6 months after the Stockholm Games was concluded. There's also some evidence that Thorpe was known to have played professional baseball before the Olympics, but the AAU had ignored the issue until being confronted with it in 1913. The only positive element of this affair for Thorpe was that as soon as the news was reported that he had been declared a professional, he received offers from professional sports clubs. I mean, any questions, any comments thus far?
Well, baseball wasn't even an Olympic sport at the time as well, and that was one of the reasons that they thought it should.
Yeah. Well, that's right. He played professional baseball, but as you say, baseball's not an Olympic sport. So how do the two marry up?
How lucky we are now that we got Laura Ginsburg. My word.
Yeah. Thorpe signed with the New York Giants baseball club in 1913 and played sporadically with them as an outfielder for 3 seasons. After playing in the minor leagues with the Milwaukee Brewers in 1916, he returned to the Giants in 1917, but was sold to the Cincinnati Reds early in the season. Yeah, so he had an extensive baseball career. I mean, he was sold backwards and forwards. He'd obviously got a lot of ability. I think his batting average was something like .332, which don't mean a lot to me. It probably means a lot to Paul.
It's good. Yeah, that's very
good.
Yeah,
that's a good average.
Yeah,
and that was his best average, but he did that a few seasons. He was pretty good baseball player.
With the top players.
Yeah, but Thorpe had not abandoned football either. He first played professional football in 1913 as a member of the Indiana-based Pine Village Pros, a team that had several season-winning streak against local teams during the 1910s. He then signed with the Canton Bulldogs, and I think with the Canton Bulldogs, not known nowadays, but in those days, they were a top team, and I think they won the league 3 years running. Yeah, and he got at that stage $250 a game, so he was really getting paid. So it'd be $6,318 in today's money. The team won titles, as I said, in 1916, 17, and 19, and he reportedly ended the 1919 championship game by kicking a wind-assisted 95-yard punt from his team's own 5-yard line, effectively putting the game out of reach. Yeah.
Wow.
In 1920, the Bulldogs were one of 14 teams to form the American Professional Football Association, which would become the NFL. 2 years later, and as I said earlier, Thorpe was the original president of the Football League. So most of Thorpe's biographers had been unaware of his basketball career until a ticket that documented his time in professional basketball was discovered in an old book in 2005. By 1926, he was the main feature of the world-famous Indians of LaRue, a travelling basketball team, Jim Thorpe's world-famous Indians, barnstormed for at least 2 years in multiple states. Yeah, so basketball, American football, baseball, it was terrific. I'll skip to the chase. I've got a few minutes left, but just an aside, a big aside though, he was a friend of Jack Dempsey, and he used to spar with Dempsey in the gym. And Dempsey was amazed by his power and his skill and his technical knowledge of boxing, and said that if he'd picked up boxing earlier and then chosen that as a career, he would undoubtedly, in Dempsey's opinion, been a champion. That's saying something from somebody like Jack Dempsey. Over the years, supporters of Thorpe attempted to have his Olympic titles reinstated. US Olympic officials, including former teammate and later president of the IOC, Avery Brundage, rebuffed several attempts, with Brundage once saying, "Ignorance is no excuse." Most persistent were the author, Robert Wheeler, the biography I've just shown you, and his wife, Florence Ridland. They succeeded in having the AAU and US Olympic Committee overturn its decision and restore Thorpe's amateur status before 1913. In 1982, Wheeler and Ridland established the Jim Thorpe Foundation and gained support from the US Congress. Armed with this support and the evidence from 1912 proving that Thorpe's disqualification had occurred after the 30-day time period allowed by Olympic rules, they succeeded in making the case to the IOC. In October 1982, the IOC Executive Committee approved Thorpe's reinstatement. In an unusual ruling, they declared that Thorpe was co-champion with Ferdinand Bry and Weislander, although both of these athletes had always said they considered Thorpe to be the only champion. In a ceremony on January the 18th, 1983, the IOC presented two of Thorpe's children, Gail and Bill, with the commemorative medals. Thorpe's original medals had been held in museums, but they had been stolen and have never been recovered. The IOC lists Thorpe as co-gold medalists. Thorpe's monument, featuring the quote from Gustav V, "You, sir, are the greatest athlete in the world," still stands near the town named for him, Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. The grave rests on mounds of soil from Thorpe's native Oklahoma and from the stadium in which he won his Olympic medals. President Nixon, authorized by the US Senate, proclaimed Monday, April the 16th, 1973 as Jim Thorpe Day to promote nationwide recognition of Thorpe. And in 1986, the Jim Thorpe Association established an award in Thorpe's name, given annually to the best defensive back in college football. In a poll of sports fans published in 2000 by ABC Sports, Thorpe was voted the greatest athlete of the 20th century out of 15 other athletes, including Muhammad Ali, Babe Ruth, Jesse Owens, Wayne Gretzky, Jack Nicklaus, and Michael Jordan. And in 2018, Thorpe was honoured on the Native American dollar coin. And that's your lot.
Wow.
Very good.
John,
I don't think, I mean, there's a lot of facts, a lot of information there. I've got invested in Jim Thorpe since I read the book, revisited the film, and whatever I've said only does him slight justice. There is so much information, so much he achieved. American football, he was tremendous. There are minute descriptions, there were like reports of individual matches he was in, and the things he achieved in those games was phenomenal. The same with his athletics achievements. So I'm sorry for not doing him justice, but he was a
No,
great
no,
athlete. Great athlete.
Good.
John-
Have a lie down, John.
You did, haven't
John,
Yeah.
was the disqualification basically racial because he was an Indian?
It's hinted that he is, and that if he'd not been,
When
Burt
they sort of turn a
Lancaster
blind
interested-
eye to
Yeah.
Americans.
Yeah, Burt Lancaster in his autobiography, he met Jim Thorpe because he was an extra and an advisor on the film. Burt Lancaster doesn't think it was racial, but I disagree with Burt on that, but I won't say to his face that I did. Anyway, not to his but yeah, I think it was at least partly racial, and I don't think a white athlete would have been stripped of his medals. And it was clearly dishonest, biased, and incorrect to ban him. It was outside the rules.
Yeah.
What a shame that in Hollywood now, Burt Lancaster wouldn't play that part.
No, you're right.
That's the shame
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Hollywood.
But I mean, I must admit, I knew the name, but I didn't know the story of his career, and you can see why people think he's the greatest athlete or greatest sportsman of all time.
Yeah, these are sports writers over decades have named him first the best in the first 50 years, and then subsequently the best in the entire century. He achieved so much in so many different sports at a top level. And apparently he was a very modest man, very modest, humble man.
Yeah.
A all-rounder.
Aye, fantastic. Well, thanks, John. We're less than a minute.
Well done, John.
It went on
Sorry.
so long, by the way. Yeah.
No, really
it's
good,
good.
John. Really
Good,
good.
Next
Excellent.
week, next week we've got Paul the Biscuit talking about cool runnings, amongst other things.
I won't
From
stress
sublime
the
to the
occasion, Paul.
ridiculous. From the sublime to the
Well-
ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll see you all next week, and Rotherham win tonight. Sorry.
Yeah.
Excellent, John. Really good.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
Well done, John.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
I see you, John.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.